Hi, welcome to One Word a Day. I'm Sophie, your pilot into the universe of Chinese. We are going to celebrate today because today is 1 year anniversary of this program that I set up. It's a total pet project of mine, and I started a year ago, exactly today, which is 1111. In Chinese, we see this directly translated into November 11th. But I know in English, we view November as November, not exactly 1-1, right? And the 1111 started a few years ago as a promotion, kind of comparable to Black Friday in America. It's the biggest sale day in China to celebrate singles. So people being single, we use the digit of 1. Like it's not 2. And because November, Chinese view it as the month 11, the month 1-1. And then on the day of 1-1, so there are 4. So they max out the possibilities of showing number 1 in their month calendar and to say, okay, that's the most single, most, I guess, feeling so single day of the year, and using that as an excuse or bait, however you want to view it, as a self-care, self-indulgent, self-purchase, self-consumption day. So that's encouraged to buy something nice for yourself for that day, and became a big thing, big sale day for China, digital commerce, e-commerce over there. Anyways, I started one day on that day, not exactly addressing to the commercial aspect of that newly coined Chinese National E-commerce Day, but I was using that as a starting point because 1111 is simply a nice and easy way to remember when I ever started. So a year ago, I started a program, and I have been using this opening 1 word a day every day on the screen, and I want to explain my thought about language is the currency of thinking, because we think in languages, right? Whatever language you're thinking in is most of the time is in languages. But okay, of course, there are other ways of thinking as well. Like you express your thinking in mathematical formulas, functions. You're, building a model, something like that. That's a way of thinking. And math is a language, right? In that sense. Or you think in music, or in visual arts, or 3D arts form, right? So that's all different ways of thinking or expressing or communicating. But language is special because language can be so commonly shareable. It's low cost sharing, right? In like a sound bits or visuals or videos, right? It costs more. But language, if in a text form, after especially the invention of printing, right? That's from China. That's become easier to share language. And language is this verbal communication and this verbal way of externalizing your thoughts, right? By putting down into the words. And somebody said, wording is framing, something like that, like choosing what kind of language or word you're actually frame that reality of yours. So everybody are looking at the world from their own operating system, which I view it as a language that you're operating on. Now I'm bilingual. I was native Chinese speakers. So that's my first operating system. Now, on top of that, I have this overlay of English, and sometimes I resort to either language, whichever one helps me to think it through. So that came into my mind of, I really, really want to examine my own language, native, born into this language, because I took it for granted that's how I was taught to speak. And I thought that's the way how things should. until I learned the second language. And now with the second language, I go back, revisit my mother tongue. And that gives me some new ideas about this operating system that what I want to share with you here. So basically, it's almost like archaeology of words, of language, and how that words was, we don't exactly know how that was invented, but through the result of it, which is the current language, Chinese language was using, and then the historical documents of the older forms of this now contemporary simplified Chinese Mandarin that I grew up on. From that trace back to the traditional Chinese, and there are even more traditional to the current traditional, so layers and layers. So language is a living thing, right? It got original, and I try to trace back from the characters of these relationships between the older forms of language and how the language creators back then were trying to represent our world through the visual forms, a very condensed 2D form. So that's my original idea. And I want to give you a little bit of review of one word a day. In the past year, I released 375 episodes, even if a year only 365. I have 10 extra episodes to add on, because some days I do release 4 episodes to address some special things that's off my Markov chain, the chain of characters or expressions connected by shared characters. So sometimes I do came across like a good translation of poetry, something showing how the two languages, English and Chinese, the mechanisms like working different, and sometimes it's sharing something in common. So I want to do that commentary without having to wait for the turn to have some character related in that passage to start this. So I do have additional 10 episodes on top of the everyday one phrase. And then I group them into 12 playlists. I hope by that can show you different contents or different in regards to the categories. My favorite category is called lens switching, which is regarded on how Chinese versus English are looking at similar things, but we express it differently. And by express it differently, we actually frame it differently. We're looking at through different lenses, right? So that's the lens switching I'm using. Using that to group the contents like that. Okay, so total 70 hours. Every hour I spend in front of camera and recording, there are multiple of hours of preparing for the content. And so I do kick my own myself there's some self-discipline, I guess, and the drive to go through this many hours of preparing and presenting the language to English speakers. And okay, so because each time roughly 4 characters in each episode, and then there occasionally have multiple, like up to 7 or more characters in one episode, and other times it's shorter. So overall, there are 662 characters, and a lot of them are shared and repeated. I mean, that's the meaning, that's the design, right? So this 4 character and that 4 character, at least one is overlapped character. So you can see the same character working in different context, right? So how the character's meaning may change, hang out with different groups of words, right? I mean, characters, and form different meanings. And the top reoccurring character is no. It's our Chinese negation, no. And this human figure, generic human form, second one, and then the third one is one horizontal line, just one horizontal line. And that's most top 3 reoccurred frequent characters shown in the last year. And then thank you, whoever has been following me. I know it's kind of not succinct because I don't really spend time to edit to make it more condensed. This is my original recording, and each episode I only have a rough idea of what I want to say to share in that episode, but how I'm going to say it is totally improvised. And through that, I find some fun and a kind of a liberty. And sometimes, some days I do better than other days. So thank you for sticking around, and hopefully the content help you. And the others are some data of 1 year. And so out of curiosity, I'm thinking, okay, how many languages total out there? Turn out over 7,000 languages in the world. I mean, we only have like 300 countries and 7,000 languages. And language is a living thing. So many languages coexisting on this planet Earth of about 7 billion people, right? It's not evenly distributed. Some language are more pronounced and shared by more people. And I happen to be fortunate enough to know the top 2 on the list. And you can see the top 2 actually outnumber the next tier by a lot. So English is the top, more universal than any other language. And the Mandarin speaking is simply because of the large population over there in China. But foreigners, non-English, non-Chinese speakers learning Chinese had been a trend in the past few decades, because China has been starting to interact more with the world. But now, the global climate of this cultural exchange, dynamics between countries kind of shifting. So I'm kind of starting on an awkward time, but there's never a good time to do it. I just want to do it and share the language. I share it not out of any commercial or political motivation. I share it purely out of the respect and love of my mother tongue. And it happened to be the second mostly used language in the world. And I happen to speak the #1 language. So there we go. I hope I can serve some purpose of opening the window to English speakers to see how Chinese language were formed and put together to make meaning. And it's quite some fun way to look at another language, how another language framed the world. And even as the language user, like a native user, I don't normally examine my own language through the lens of English speakers. So I'm trying to make sense to English speakers by thinking through your way, looking back on my own language. So it's kind of like a zigzag going back and forth. And that kind of dynamic and tension is what I feel make it fun for me, and hopefully make it fun for you as well. Okay, so getting back to what I call the coolness of Chinese. This language, we collectively as the Chinese language speakers, before I learned English, I have no clue that inflection even existed. So it's quite a barrier, as you can imagine, from a language without inflections. Like our nouns doesn't have gender, our verbs doesn't have tense or single or plural forms. It was not existing there. And when I had to learn the language that does have that, that's quite some. You can imagine how the teachers are happy to find mistakes out of that grammatical policing of people, right? But the essential character of Chinese is it's logographical. It comes from visuals, versus majority of the languages in the world operating sound-based. It's more audio oriented. So you have syllabus, and different syllabus combined together have some basic meanings, and you can combine different meanings to create the third layer of meaning. But Chinese starting from the visuals, and we have visuals combining to create a meaning, and the visuals together, like a different character together, can group into more meaning making. So this, layering of meaning making is really, I would say, essential, the core feature of Chinese. So because it's logographical and it is very contextual. Why? Because we don't really have the luxury to use many different syllables of sounds to make different meanings. We only have a limited number of sounds, right? The combination of the C is consonant, V is vowel. The combination of consonants plus vowel can only be so many, right? You can humanly possible only make so many sounds. And so even if we throw in another dimension, which is tones, we have 4 tones. So from this limited of consonant plus vowel combinations, and another layer of tones times 4. So everything can have 4 different tones. Even with that, it's still very limited. So Chinese character become multitaskers or multifacets. Each character carry multiple meanings. And how we decide which meaning that is totally contextual based. So you have to look at the characters next to that character to figure out collectively what they mean. And of course, over time, things are paired together habitually and formalized, and people don't even think about it, right? And that becomes our vocabulary. So vocabulary, a lot of times Chinese are 2 characters paired together, because with just one character, it can be confusing. One character can have multiple meanings. If you just pop up one character, it's hard to say which exact meaning you mean. So we have to have at least 2 to lock it to a certain meaning. And then throughout the language, I didn't talk about grammar in terms of how sentences are made. I stop at the level of these phrases, how the phrases are made. And through that, to take a peek at how the characters are made. And the Chinese formation are, to my eyes, are most of the time logical. For example, our calendar, just like in the beginning, we say Chinese view month in numerical terms. So from month 1, which is our January, to month 12, our December, we don't think in terms of January and December, different sounds to it. It's too much. We don't have that many sounds either, right? So we think in Europe numerical terms. So we have month 1, 1月份. So month 1, month 2, all the way to month 12. And that's why when we say 1111, immediately it's month 11, which is November, and 11th day. And you see, 11 is an English way of saying 10 plus 1, right? Chinese, we don't have that 11 thing. We don't have that many sounds. So we just say 11, which is 10 and 1. We don't even say and. Like and is an extra redundant message for us. We just say 10, 1, and that's our 11, that's our 11. So we don't use sound. We don't have that many sound. We use concepts and logic to build it together. And this language is very logical in that sense. But of course, throughout the evolution of language, sometimes characters were borrowed from this meaning to mean another thing. That does happen. So there are non-linear elements in Chinese, and just like English, non-linear make it cool, make it mysterious. I hope I can explain majority of it, but sometimes it's just mysterious. Okay, and here we are looking at the character level. There are total ever existed Chinese character variations of 370,000 characters. And out of them, the survivors of them that are still currently in use and in our contemporary Chinese dictionary is like less than 20% of them, 50,000. And that's a lot already. And look how much we covered so far. In the first year, we covered less than 1,000 characters. That's how small we are. And then, but don't worry, we most commonly use Chinese characters just 2000. And if you look at this graph, I try to visualize it for you in measurement of thousands. So this is the current living Chinese characters, 50,000. And out of that, the darkest color are the grounds we covered in the first year already. And the second shade is enough to kind of operate in China, like a functional, be practical, can kind of afford living in there. But you're still not very, you probably still doesn't sound highly intelligent yet until you reach to this color of green. That's about 8,000 characters. That's after college graduation. And that's our considered literacy level. Like you reach a higher education level of vocabulary. 8,000, where about 10%, less than 10% from highly educated Chinese. But I mean, it's pretty good, right? Just 1 year, we covered a lot of ground already. And if I go at the same speed, by year 4, for sure, like we will cover this 2,000 that you can survive in China. And lastly, this painting that I have been using the background is from the Forbidden City Museum, and it's done almost 1,000 years ago. So history, culture is a big part of this language. And because there are so many generations before me, generations of people and language users, generations of artists in different forms to express their living experience in their time in the land of China back then, however regime was that, whatever dynasty was that, that they have this sensibility that's kind of eventually embedded in the language and inherited by me. And now I'm sharing with the English-speaking world. And this particular art piece was done 1,000 years ago, and it's white peonies. That's an example of the cultural heritage. I like how rich that is. I feel very fortunate to be born into this amazing language and this culture. I hope I can get to know more about the culture. And ironically, in China, I don't really have a lot of resources to get close to the roots of my culture. It's come out with a certain distance, like speaking another language. And then I, looking back, start to realize what my culture, my mother tongue, had been such a rich resources, a lot of wisdom embedded in the language, like higher, like a safe for the rainy days, that kind of concept. I know English have such expressions as well, but Chinese really formulate that into our daily language. And if your mom wants to give you a lesson, they can just use this phrases that everybody knows and to illustrate their point. I mean, in that sense, probably it's confining as well, because it's so already formulated. You don't really need to be creative in creating your own way of expressing it sometimes. I mean, people still do, but we just, throughout history, thousands of years, language users have put together some pretty time-honored expressions, and which are what I already in my brain that I'm drawing out each day to share with you. I hope you'll be enjoying it. And I'm planning to continue. I hope I can cover to at least some sort of sufficiency ground. And this is just an enjoyable journey for me to look further deep into my own culture and from a distance as well. And the ironic thing is, another thing is I visited Boston Museum of Art and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So both American museums have a big collection of Eastern Asian arts and culture, and I'm in shock like how much I see over there. So again, I feel like I have the key hold in me because I already tuned in, raised on this language, and I have a relatively easier access to this rich wealth of knowledge of culture of different expressions. So anyways, thank you for being here. I will see you in year 2.